Daniel's here. Correctivity for homeostasis and thereby autonomy and sovereignty of European peoples, genus and species, structured by the concept of unionization, structuring accountability, coherence, agency, and warranted assertability. For the maintenance of our human ecology, our species, and coordination with other human ecologies, species, and pervasive ecology. Okay. We're going to continue in the vein of applying correctivity to the most recent shows here and podcasts and posts that have been going on in and about the interests of European peoples. So, one thing that, oh, by the way, let me know if my sound is okay, if you would. In reflection on the discussion, first of all, in reflection on the discussion with the Mizrahi Jewish guy from last time, I want to make it clear that though I will talk with Jewish folks, that I do not see them as insiders to our cause in any way. They are another people with a different set of interests from Europeans, largely in friction, of course. So just because I talk to them, I don't want anybody to get the idea that I'm like I'm viewing them as one of us. They're not. But I noticed a couple things that I found interesting for that morning House of Comments. One of the things that I found interesting from that discussion is that he thought that I would be positively impressed that he has private conversations with what's his name? With Alex Jones, which of course couldn't be further from the truth. Well, no, I'm impressed that he would, that he would have audience with, with that much, with someone with that much influence and media reach, but never could stand Alex Jones. I couldn't listen to him. And of course, I see him as a terrible diversion from the promotion of our interests with his nutty conspiracy theories and his diversion from the actual antagonists or wherever they may be. But more interesting than that was that he claims to be the one or one of the ones who told Alex Jones to frame his arguments against the left, which is what, of course, what I've been saying is that particularly as of 2008, whether you are Israeli or diasporic kosher, you are going to be seeing an intersecting against your interests by anybody who gleans onto the underlying concept of the left. So this Mizrahi guy still thinks that, he sees me as one who, typical right winger, reactionary, who would think that Alex Jones is somehow worth listening to. I might have listened to half a show once, holding my nose. Who it thinks that Trump was a big fan of Trump, and I just never was. The most you could give Trump is that he would not be as bad as Hillary Clinton, but it's obvious that both sides are being played by the kosher folks in tandem with their right-wing sellout cohorts and liberal sellout cohorts. Again, primarily for the to undo the Iran deal, and also second-tier moneyed interests, real estate holders like Sheldon Adelson in the United States. Had some concerns as well. In addition to, there was some Russian, mostly kosher Russian interests in Trump getting elected, and they were, helping to bail out Trump's failed business holdings. Of course, they misconstrue the whole Russian connection there, making it contingent upon outright collusion and so on, and making it strictly Russian. Anyway, that's that. So this Mizrahi guy, if he says that his Messiah figure is claiming that the diaspora must repent and forget about all their interests in diaspora and come back to Israel. Whether they do or not is that's fine, and he would be in less conflict with us if they're trying to get out of our hairs and out of our business. Tell them to declare call to, but it doesn't really change much. We're not going to. We obviously can't depend on that, and we have to pursue our own interests and autonomy, irrespective. So it's not really that important, other than it's somebody that we can. The good thing about it is that talking to someone like him, we can make it clear that this platform is innocent. And the good thing about that, even though some might not find it as exciting, because they still have, understandably, the will to revenge. We have the opportunity in demonstrating the innocence of this platform to proceed more freely, openly, and honesty our quest for autonomy and sovereignty for our European peoples, genus, and species. Okay, so that's that. Before somebody gets into criticizing me for being good buddies with the tribal folks, whether Zionist or diaspora. It's their problem. Anyway, and I think is barium the word? House of Commons says abortion in the UK has slaughtered over 10 million white babies since the 1970s. I'm glad you bring up the abortion issue because I want to make it clear that this platform is pro-choice, and by pro-choice, of course, we recognize what that means is that if somebody finds abortion unconscionable, we understand that. It's a pretty brutal thing, and don't have one. It just. However, I'm very, I've become more and more happy with how this platform sorts out those who are reliably concerned from an organic level to a theoretical level with the interests of European peoples, with defending us. Because if you are so principled, so to speak, so universally principled as to want to prohibit abortion under any circumstances, or let's say most, anyway, that would not be in white interests, even if a lot of white babies are being aborted. More non-whites, at any rate, you've got an exponential population of non-whites that's threatening to overrun white European populations. And let's say and are selecting mode of behavior of sexual conduct that is going to create more pregnancies that are not prepared for, such that abortion might seem like the best option for the impregnated woman. And the single parent family and the kind of destruction that would be visited upon European peoples by these less than well cared for children, less than well brought up children, testifies to the fact that being so committed against abortion is not a commitment to the interests of whites. If you are universally pro-life on principle, then you want Africans and other non-whites to have babies, no matter how many and of what impact on whites. You want whites to have babies even if raped by blacks. You were, as opposed to Europe, the the interests of European of European peoples, our group interests. My position has always been you can't value life so much as to make it unlivable. And that's why I favor the death penalty, and that's why I'm pro-choice. And that is an answer. I was told, disingenuously by some kosher guy that was arguing with over at Northern Stream, that I didn't give an answer. That is an answer. Even if you look upon abortion as killing or murder, it's an answer. It's an answer. I concede. I don't like thinking about abortion. I find it grotesque, and yes, it'd be best to keep it to a minimum. First of all, by actually being responsible about sex and caring about the people that you're having sex with, such that if a pregnancy does come about, it's with someone that you would want to have a child with, at very least value enough to put it up for adoption, I suppose. Having said that, I was listening to who it was, maybe Richard Spencer talking with Dalton, talking about Thomas Aquinas, making a distinction between the vegetative, the animal, and the human progression of the fetus to child development. And that contributing to the trimester argument, perhaps, and the ability to feel pain argument. Irrespective, even in as much as it's killing, I am even in as much as it's killing an organism, I would maintain pro-choice. Again, if you find an abortion unconscionable, I understand you don't have one. That's pro-choice. But if you are universally pro-life, you are skewed of white interests and advocacy. Even if it's murder, even if it's gruesome, and I admit the thought of it grosses me out, I'm still pro-choice, and in the case of rape, I would have no revulsion whatsoever. If my daughter were raped by some black, I would happily abort that thing. So this issue, just like the Ukrainian war, which we'll talk about in a second, is the chemical compound barium that sorts out matters very effectively. It sorts out who is really concerned for the interests of European peoples and who's like not, who has some sort of, I'm saying I'm proud of how my platform is. It sorts out those who are concerned for praxis, for our interests as a group, as opposed to those who tried to found their the warrant of their assertions on pure principles or pure nature, below praxis or beyond praxis, beyond the correctivity of our people's accountability to group interests and boundaries. So they're taking that principle beyond our interests. Now, again, I was maintained that first of all, you would create a culture and a rule structure which would lessen the case of unwanted pregnancy. But where it did happen, you could provide counseling so that if it's feasible for a woman to bring a child to term so that and put it up for adoption, that she could, um, but that nevertheless, if it wasn't feasible, she would have the option for termination. Perhaps there, in certain communities, you would want to prohibit it after a certain number of months, but I wouldn't even try to universalize that. It's when it comes to non-European peoples, it's their business. I wouldn't try to, I wouldn't try to force anything on them. It's the problem of their folk. Okay, but if you're, Christianity is another barium, is another sort of who cares about us, who conducts themselves as a proper left ethno-nationalist, or who is a right winger going upon principles which transcend in a bad way our interests as European people. Well, Christians, you're making Jesus number one and rolling the dice that on some residual, maybe at best rolling the dice that on some residual instinctual level that whites will reproduce and maintain themselves enough. But you're placing Jesus before us, and that's unacceptable. So, yeah, what I would say to my colleagues who are against abortion, okay, I mean, if you or find abortion abhorrent for that. I understand you don't have one. But, in the most marked example of, for example, rape, you should not find it unconscionable. Okay, well, now I'm going to have to talk more about academic agent, because he's one of these guys who, he's an accredited academic, and pretty erudite, and he's got the it's a mental acuity to juggle, if not manage, the literature that he's immersed himself in, and sort it in such a way to present an at least ostensibly authoritative position. Because he's able to sort and articulate the matter of his literature in a fairly clear way. Now, that's not necessarily a good thing, and it's it's an interesting phenomenon that I've been noticing for decades now, and don't see people quite articulating. The fact that people can be not only articulate but quite intelligent, actually, in some ways, and while screwing up badly in other ways. An academic agent would be just another example of that. I fell asleep I was listening to his recent discussion with Cotto, which that just goes to show who he would, who he's seeking, considering his friends, Cotto and Gottfried. But I'll go into Academic Agent hopefully more thoroughly once I re-listen to that show in its entirety. But an obvious, the most fundamental way of sorting out people who are concerned with our interests is to look straight away at who's talking. Are they a European person? Are they not? Are they Claire Kaw, who's Chinese? Are they Academic Agent, who's Iranian? He's half Welsh, but he's half Iranian. Well, genetic interests do come through, and there's a shoddiness of concern and a lack of intimacy with the long-term deep concerns of our ethnic genetic interests, because he's an outsider. That's, I'm sure, part of why he's so on board with the Gottfried framework of identifying right and vilifying this characterology of the left. And as I was saying last time, how it's unfortunate that he has such a relatively big audience and is taking up our issues and misdirecting them with in a way that seems credible that could seem credible to the casual observer. For example, last time I was talking about how he was taking up the comparison of conservatism and nature, and I said, of course, he screws that up because he's eschewing something that was built into this platform right on its fundaments, which is that ecology is a conservative matter. And it's just one of the things that causes me disgust with guest worker, because he doesn't have the intelligence and judgment to recognize the importance of that among many planks that it was setting forth, and therefore allows someone like Academic Agent to mislead our people, whereas this platform should have been put forth and enhanced with conviction by guest worker, but was not. Anyway, we're doing it anyway. But then you have an Academic Agent. I heard him last time. Again, he had a whole chapter about how Paul Gottfried is the most wonderful thing since sliced bread, and of course that's ridiculous. I've talked a lot about how Gottfried is veritably one of the chief architects framing false opposition and controlled opposition. And this Iranian guy, Academic Agent, is talking about how I heard him mentioning a book, right? This is how you know that he's not organically corrected, or one of the ways you know it's not. When you hear people, these right wingers start to blame things that went the wrong way for our interest in the '60s, and they want to blame it on the hippies, and and stupidly, academic agent is, I he's going there. He's saying, oh well, the hippies, that was they were a astroturf thing, which is not really true. By the way, that's you got what's his name, Weird Scenes Inside Laurel Canyon guy, who tried to say that it was the CIA proposed this stupid theory that the CIA created hippies in order to repulse the mainstream against the anti-war movement, because they would just be so grossed out by their long hair and so on. It's the dumbest theory I've ever heard. But anyway, academic agent was saying that he read a book that told him that people are being told that the hippies were just everywhere during the '60s, that they were big, pervasive phenomenon, when really they were confined to a little place, a little square mile in San Francisco, and a little square mile in Soho. I don't know what's Soho, London, I guess it means, but or maybe it means Soho, New York. Anyway, they were, they were a relatively small percentage of the population, but it wasn't confined to these places. They were everywhere. All universities. It was very. I had long hair. Even though I was a little bit late for that, the hippie thing. All my friends had long hair, and we were living in New Jersey, not confined to some square mile. And hippie, it was very common for teenagers during those years, the late '60s and early '70s, to be hippie-ish, to have longish hair, to not want, and here's the thing. Here's the important thing. I know this is everywhere. That this guy is doing the bidding of his Jewish masters, whether he knows it or not. I'm talking about academic agent. When he tries to say that this was astroturf, as if that it's not an organic motive. What could be a more organic motive than not wanting to be drafted into the Vietnam War, to die for this war that was of no clear and present danger to our borders and boundaries, to our people, to ourselves. So, in other words, academic age is full of shit. He talked about a boomer truth regime, right? This is like going to the most fundamental thing, central issue for European peoples. That is the right to be, for white men in particular, Dasein. This is the white postmodern term from estrangement in the Cartesian detachment and universal principles, back to the praxis of our interests and the caring, as Heidegger says, by contrast, caring what you care about. So here's academic agent saying trying to say that that's astroturf, and take advantage of the fact that people are going to be inarticulate. He's talking about these stupid concepts of the boomer truth regime, right? Which when he talks about that, he's only talking about mainstream people outside of WN, of that generation, who are pretty much on board with the kosher perspective and the uh, and you know that's it. And ensconced in that framework. He's not talking about right wing boomers and boomers who uh, have been functioning within WN, like David Duke and so on. And he's not, because he's trying to like soft pedal Hitler and Nazism and say, oh, well, we really got to get over the guilt trips about this. We got to get over the guilt trip, but not by saying, oh, it just wasn't that evil, and like really Hitler had good reason to do what he. No, not only is that not true, what Hitler did was evil, and he wasn't justified. This is not what is needed for European interests, and it goes to his Iranianness, the fact that he's really sloppy and less caring about European peoples, in the fact that it's like, oh, so Hitler's cockamamie ideology got 50 million European peoples killed. Oh, this is not but we shouldn't look upon him as the greatest evil. That's your priority. You're Iranian. You don't care about European people. Academic agent. Shut up. Just shut up. You say get out. You get out. Like, mind your own damn business. Anyway, okay, and of course he's going to come down on the go with this false dichotomy between it's either Putin or giving Zelensky all the weapons and backing that he desires. And anybody who rallies behind Ukrainian nationalism, they must be a fool, because these people, what is this thing they say, that these people can't even find Ukraine on the map? Who the hell can't find Ukraine on the map? What are you talking about? It's the stupidest straw man in the world, right? So that now that people who, mostly people who back Putin, who defend Putin, who sympathize with Putin, that's a way of sorting out. This is a person who's not organically connected to the interests of European peoples. They're operating on some right-wing reactionary principle at best. Of course, people who support Zelensky's call for direct warring confrontation are not expressing European interests either. And the fact that make it an either or is a foolishness that Greg Johnson can fall into, but not a platform that's thought out better than his philosophical capabilities would have it. But Putin is the aggressor, and it's not only is he the aggressor in regions beyond the Donbass and Crimea, but when you think about it, okay, in as much as it's true that Azov and so on, and whoever supported them have been bombing the Donbass. I consider that flatly wrong. Nevertheless, that region has also been part of Ukraine. So, you can say even there that Russia has been the invading force. Now, I think that that's a concession. I believe that that's a concession that Ukraine should have and should make to just give that over to Russia. Now, it's unfair. It's unjust. It was once populated not by Russian people, by Ukrainians who are distinct enough from Russians. And it became populated by Russians and Russian speakers after the Holodomor killed its people. This policy of Stalin and Kaganovich had starved to death these people for this dumb Marxist policy of collectivization and appropriation of foodstuffs, and punishment of the kulaks, what they call them. Anyway, if that's what it would take, the West should not be engaging in a war over that territory. This is that kind of geostrategy and warring is the kind of stuff that would be favored by people who really don't care about European people's lives. People like Halsey English who say, it's like, well, I don't care if I don't care if Putin drops a nuclear bomb on Ukraine. Well, you fat, disgusting pig. I hope that you drop dead. Hold on just a second. I'll be back in about 30, 40 seconds. So Ukrainian ethno-nationalism does serve to as a sorter out of those people who are not operating in the interests of European peoples, and it also sorts out people who are not most competent. As I said, Greg Johnson is probably the best of the famous voices, and still not nearly good enough because he's operating in his right-wing snootery. So he doesn't manage to get that right. That's why he's ignoring Zelensky and NATO and right-wing interests and the over-the-top stuff of Azov and Bandera, blinded by his right-wing precepts to the genuine organic interests of Ukrainians, which would want to defend their people, but not in such a foolish, over the top way. Okay. What was it? Now, I was playing. We're talking about Ukraine, and I don't hear anybody else talking. Never heard anybody else talking about Ukraine in this way, of it being yet another state falling under Operation Clean Break, Project for a New American Century. Victoria Nuland's husband, Robert Kagan, he'll give war a chance, right? He's got his regime change. He's got Zelensky in there, and then you had this statement by Jewish American General Wesley Clark that's been going around, of him talking about this memo that he was handed before Operation Desert Storm, the second Gulf War, that 7 nations were going to be undergoing regime change in 5 years, something like that. And this disgusting Gonzalo Lira using that as evidence to convict America of, or try to convict America of being, the the strictly bad side here, and try to exonerate Putin and Russia for what they're doing. Well, Wesley Clark is not a European. He is a kosher guy. And Operation Clean Break is not, even though it's renamed Project for American Century, is not in the interests of European Americans. Some right-wingers might take personal interest in it. Maybe Dick Cheney can find profit in it. But it's not in the interests of European Americans. This is in the interest of Israelis, the kosher folks, and whatever right-wingers and liberals and neoliberals might want to sell out. Now, Wesley Clark has what famously made the statement with regard to the NATO war in Serbia, that he sees no room for pure ethnic states in Europe anymore. So he's against ethno-nationalism. He, this is a typical kosher perspective, and it's the same perspective that Mearsheimer will take, that Stephen Kotkin will take, that Timothy Snyder will take. All these people who present themselves as having a balanced perspective, if not one that forgives Putin, and present themselves as the hand of restraint. Now, and the voice of democracy, and they set themselves up for a kind of false dichotomy with those right wingers who are reacting against their version of democracy, what they want to call democracy, right? Okay. This is where academic agent is going too. And again, I have to address him more thoroughly after I revisit his recent podcasts. But he's setting up, along with the likes of what's his fuck, Curtis Yarvin, another one of his friends, right? An idea of democracy that it is inclusive. First of all, inclusive of everybody in the populace, but then, of course, when it gets into the hands of a Mearsheimer and so on, it would be extended almost indefinitely to anybody who joins the nation. But anyway, and I understand his new book is something about elitist theory. Now, you don't want this Iranian guy telling you as a European how to live your life. And you can see how he is misframing events. Coming back to the issue, but it does okay, bring up something that I have not spoken about too much. I've only said that beginning to reconstruct our borders and boundaries through the concept of unionization, that would structure accountability and correctivity, homeostasis, agency, coherence. I haven't said much at all about who would be, let's say, most in charge about maintaining that structure and how they would manage that, maintain that structuring. For one thing, this position holds in place that everybody would understand that the borders are not up for vote. The boundaries are not up for vote. There's no democratic issue there. So in that regard, just about everybody is a leader in a sense. Everybody knows, no, this is not something that is negotiable. Everybody takes the lead and says, no, you cannot be a citizen here. Citizenship is the key issue. Citizenship in this nation, this virtual nation at this point, lest Claire try to say that I'm trying to kick somebody out or establish apartheid. In this virtual nation, this really just group organization is for European genus and species, genetically European genus and species. Now, okay, you say, well, how do you maintain it? Well, one of the key structuring means, one of the key pillars within that structuring to provide for accountability would be the institutionalization of marriage and monogamy as an important option, a choice which is sacred. You don't have to do that, but we view it as just vitally important, and we will articulate that in detail as time goes on, and we will facilitate people in matching properly, because if it's a lifetime commitment, you're gonna need help to make the correct choice. That's one thing, but also now coming back to that's for the populace, so that they are not, so that they can maintain, they not become cynical and disillusioned, and not be lured by the false idea of the Abrahamic religions that only they provide for that kind of concern. But going back to the leadership, it just would not be a permanent, something looked upon as a permanent caste, just a more ecological perspective of, those people were mature enough, who've demonstrated that they have enough historical and philosophical understanding, and of course, without even question, know that the borders are not up for negotiation, and the boundaries are not up for negotiation. That's not, again, people have their freedom. We're relatively free individual liberty within the borders, and if you don't want to intermarry with Europeans, then you're free to leave. But you cannot, but you would have to. You would be relieved of your membership anyway. So it's the borders that are conservative, but individual liberty is relatively free. That's a European way. Now, these leaders, again, there'd be certain details, but that might have to be sorted out, but not that many. I mean, and these are details. But what I'm coming to is the issue that is being disingenuously handled by the critics of democracy and someone like academic agent, that the notion of correctivity is sort of predicated on a democratic way of thinking, in the sense that there will be different inputs. There's one guy and he has a thought, and then another person sees some mistakes and errors in that need to be shored up and corrected. And this is the way, and this goes back and forth, and between different people, and this is the way a homeostasis is achieved in the system, in the maintenance. Look, what you're doing here is putting the borders at risk, so I propose this. So you're shaping and crafting these specificatory structures as they go along. Now, even the Greeks did not have everybody voting. The progenitors of democracy. Those voting were adult men who had property, not slaves, right? And if they voted, say, on war, then they went to war themselves. Okay, so it wasn't like even there, it was not an indefinitely extended franchise. So this, quote, democracy, that this Mearsheimer-like mess, Mearsheimer mush, that someone like academic agent is trying to propose as what the, quote, left would be advocating, is not, even at that, it would be a straw man of a cartoon of democracy. But we take it a bit further. Of course, when we're talking about this democratic input of crucial decisions, this is not coming from just anybody in the populace. With regard to, again, nobody the borders are not up for vote. That's not even a question. That monogamy is a sacred option. Again, that's not up for debate. You don't have to participate in monogamy, but you have to recognize that option as crucial. Um, but there, but in terms of leadership, and there's, I don't know who would delegate responsibility, and there's certain things that are, you know, factual matters that got to be handled by competent people, whether it's environmental matters and engineering matters that you know can't be handled just by people because they're nice, because they're your friend, but it's got to be someone who can best do the job from within our people, and who has the ability to judge, where to delegate responsibility and so forth. Uh, this is going to be a more limited group of people. So democracy is not something it's something, the democratic idea is constrained even more when it comes to the leadership position. Now, there's something I want to say about the very idea of voting. Um, I'm looking at this, and I'm alone so far as I know, so far, and like scratching my head and looking at the voting as a pretty much a quantitative thing. That's not, that's pretty clumsy. I don't know. I'm sure that that's not the best way to handle the resolution of an issue. It's either right or wrong, because it might be a specificatory structure, it might be largely right, but needs some refinements. And then there's a back and forth correctivity between these sort of elitely positioned interlocutors. Uh, so that's more the way it would work, and lest someone like academic agent, misrepresent what we're saying here and give misdirection as he would. I mean, anybody who's friends with Curtis Yarvin and Gottfried is not, this Iranian guy is not acting in our interests, popular as he is. Um, So that these issues have to be discussed and sorted out a bit, but it's not the first order. The first order is, staving off the misdirection of these sorts who are, moving apace with the Gottfried framework. Okay. Who did I want to talk about next? Unfortunately, I heard Dr. Christopher Lintner's son talking with Claire Kaw, and I haven't finished. I just started it, and I say unfortunately because she's a Chinese woman who's not only not operating in her interest. She's pretty sure a bad actor. I mean, she's trying to libel me and say, and trying to get me, hang stuff on me that could be render me culpable in the eyes of the kosher folks and others. But at best she's a brick wall, and Christian Lindner, he will find that. I understand the temptation to talk to her to begin with because she's a lovely speaking manner, and she obviously has a pretty high IQ. And to begin with, she'll ask you questions and let you, to some extent, unfold your thoughts. And that's not an opportunity that's everywhere, So I tried that myself to begin with, and but he'll find out. He'll find out that ultimately she's a waste of time at best, worse. But in this particular podcast, he was really talking about the side of his father that's I'm less interested in. That is to say, the religious inquiry. I'm interested in where he was looking into the non-historicity of Jesus. Yeah, that part, but less so in what might replace it in terms of Buddhism and Pythagoreanism. Pythagoreanism is a bit more interesting than the Buddhism, but there's aspects of Buddhism that are okay. But anyway, I'm less interested in the religious stuff than I am in Dr. Lintner's debunking of the Holocaust deniers, and they're not talking about that. So I'll look upon that. I'll revisit that discussion later at my convenience. But he should be aware that this is just, it's a waste of time. Claire Clyde. Somebody called for a strike against her one of her more recent videos. She was trying to denounce me and render me unimportant and an unworthy source of information. She's always trying to do that, and she's an asshole. She's a Chinese woman who has some sort of agenda, and it's not, that agenda is not in the interest of European peoples. Okay. Now, I mentioned, we're talking about sorting out who is in the interest of European peoples and who isn't. Yeah, Claire Call might have 110 IQ. I don't know. Maybe 120. And I was asked who was on her side. Well, someone like Lintner there, he could be on our side, along with his friend Per Norden, came from Sweden, and then Snorkel Blog could potentially. Of course, I forgot. I was in big remiss in not mentioning Mirth Barron, Irish guy friend who lives in England, as one is likely to stay the course with our platform. And there are others. It's set forth to be the most popular platform because we have the most reasoned positions. Most people are not going to want to be associated with Hitler. I don't want to try to redeem Hitler. Most people are not Christians. I'm talking about European peoples now. They don't believe it. They recognize it as nonsense. Maybe culturally, in some sense, maybe in the old sense of, like, you say you're Christian as in not Jewish, but that's not an expression of belief. And they recognize that Jewish people are others. They're a distinct group with interests clearly, and they couldn't be more clear, that are different from ours, from the interests of European peoples. Most people are going to recognize that. Most people are going to intelligent enough to understand what I'm saying about the right wing and its scientism and its religious folly and its inherent instability as it tries to establish pure warrants below or beyond the correctivity of praxis, because in unstable, not facilitating homeostasis, misdirected with its red caping of the left and its underlying depth grammar of unionization and coalition building, which would structure accountability and correctivity and homeostasis, stability. And coherence. So most people are going to be able to understand that, and they're going to be able to understand how our people are being misrepresented and misdirected to whatever extent these misdirectors are capable from a correct understanding of what this marketing campaign has been doing. Again, a marketing campaign which was stepped up in 2008 to do damage control and establish controlled opposition for the intersectionality that was going on against kosher power and interests and their right-wing cohorts. So they saw the kind of reaction that was going on against the neocons and their Operation Clean Break wars. They saw the kind of reaction that was going on against political correctness, which are these culturally Marxist left unions of non-whites and anti-whites in coalition that wound up, attacking Jewish power and interests eventually. In other words, intersecting against them. The intersection, the recognition that the neocons in their clean break was a kosher thing, and the recognition that the Austrian school stuff was quite kosher, and that it had its magic hand was not quite so invisible. It was beginning to look like Ayn Rand and Greenspan and von Mises and Ben Bernanke, and it was creating these boom bust cycles that could be played ultimately to their interest to greater hegemony than ever, and people were being aware that this is a right-wing thing. And the right-wingers, there were plenty of white right-wingers who were willing to take the payoff and pretend that they, as they do, that they were cleaning up because of their objective merit. They're just smarter than the rest of us. They're better than the rest of us. Same with the liberals. If money is not their prime motivation, if they just want to be conduct themselves with greater liberty, like licentious pigs with greater license, they too were operating on pseudo-objectivist grounds. So this is the right wing and the liberals, and the common denominator of the right wing, the liberals, and the neoliberals. In other words, the people who are betraying our interests. They think that they're objective, and when they would supposedly defend us, they are doubling down on objective arguments of pure warrant based on nature, IQ, God, principles, facts, truth. They'll say that this represents us. No, no. And of course, because that doesn't represent us, that just represents this, just facts that are in the mix. The kosher folks would be wanting to cater to that idea, and they more than ever are alter casting white identity as right and far right because it is associated with this pseudo objectivism, and it diverts us. And they've ramped up this. They've ramped up this characterology of the left as the enemy, because that would be the means by which we would organize, we would unionize against the exploitation of elites, whether kosher or right-wing sellouts or liberals taking the license and liberty on the basis of pseudo-objectivism. So our relative interests would be organized by this left notion of unionization, and that would provide the means of accountability for our people and holding elitists to account for their transgression against the boundaries of our people and their operations against our homeostasis, our autonomy and sovereignty thereby. So don't wonder at the beast, academic agent. He's not one of us, and he's not about our interests. He's gonna talk about how phony Zelensky it all is, as if we don't know that. But he's going to go and he's going to defend Putin, and he's going to blame America and not, and not Zog and not the right wing, the complicit right wing sellouts and liberals and neoliberals who are complicit. The right wingers more typically selling out for money and their personal status and power, and liberals and neoliberals and liberals more for the sake of their licentiousness, taking the license that's offered for the brief account of their supposed objectivity. Well, I'm just so beautiful. I'm just so wonderful. I don't want to be held to the boundaries of, constrained by boundaries and borders. I'm just this wonderful liberal, so objective, and you're just jealous because I traipse all over the place, and the liberal the right winger more characteristic. Well, I'm on top. You're just jealous because I have all this money, and I'm on top because I have this high IQ, and that's how I know that I'm entitled to screw you and flush you down the toilet because the kosher folks told me so. Here's Steve Saylor and with his cockamamie notion of ethnic genetic interests. Ethnic genetic interests. So everybody knows that's about IQ. What the hell kind of sense does that make? Talk about a red cape. Not human biodiversity. That's about IQ. What the hell kind of sense does that make? It only makes sense if you're trying to promote Ashkenazi interests. That makes no sense whatsoever. Human biodiversity. I mean, IQ is it's one criteria, but for the most part, it's a quantitative evaluation. Hierarchical, that if emphasize where emphasized serves Ashkenazi interest in some asshole like Kyle Rowland. Uh, you know, it makes invisible other distinctions, other niche qualitative distinctions that are ecologically all important, which is what biodiversity should be concerned with, an ecological disbursement and respect for differences in qualitative niche evolution, not some quantitatively falsely comparing criteria of abilities. Both within and between peoples, right? So where were we? Maybe it's not the best time of day to podcast. It's pretty early in London. It's late night in New York. It's 2:00. It's like 2:00 in the morning. Three o'clock. 3:00 in the morning. 2:00 Chicago. 1:00 Denver, and 12:00 Los Angeles. But these are things that I didn't want to discuss with others because I don't need to the trammeling of an interlocutor right now. These aren't things really to debate. But talk about a red caping of an issue. Human biodiversity represented as a matter of IQ. I mean, that's flagrant. And Steve Sailer is what? He's like, I don't know, a quarter or a half Ashkenazi. Again, you cannot allow these people to represent our interest, our framework, and our views. This was the big the conflict that I had with Millennial Woes, and I'm right and he's profoundly wrong for having tried to ostracize me for criticizing Vivian Veritas for promoting the definition of our terms, along with Rachel Haywire, another kosher lady. This this is a trap that a novice like Millennial Woes will fall prey to, and largely for his conceits. There's not a good reason. There's really not a good reason for him, defending this framework. I say that for the sake of Snorkel Blog, who has appeared on Millennial Woes, and I don't know, might be made somewhat uncomfortable. I saw my Twitter thread, this is Zedez promoting Jonathan Pohl again. It's like Zedez is and she's also a moderator on semiagogues stuff. So she's caught up with these right wingers and these kind of like American Germanic reactionaries who have their reasons, not good reasons, for, along with like people like Carolyn Yeager, for taking the worst possible rendition of where I'm coming from, the most antagonistic. And that's, so, that explains in part, I think, the absurd hatred that she has taken towards me. I mean, this claim that my platform offered nothing positive to women, it's so not true. And yet, why would she say that? Well, she says that because she's caught up with these people like Carolyn Yeager, and these people who, these Hitler redemptionists and whatnot. Anyway, it's her loss. It's too bad. She doesn't. She's not appreciating, as the right wingers don't, that you can chart a separate path from Jewish power and influence. You can be sufficiently critical of the kosher folks and not be obliged to try to redeem Hitler and Nazism whatsoever. Totally not necessary. Of course, reasonable to say that I may have had some things right here or there, but just no need to be ridiculous. And certainly not the thing that we want to do to generate inter-European conflict. This war in Ukraine is a disgrace. Putin did not have to do this at all, and that's not to say that there were not stupid things coming from the ranks of Ukraine. There were, between these over-the-top neo-Nazi right-wingers and the kosher folks who would deploy them and also connect with the kosher folks and right-wingers of the United States. Nevertheless, there's no excuse for this, and people who don't care, who say, "Oh, I don't care," they are detached from the competent basis of our concerns. Alrighty then, how long are we going to? A minute and 35. Okay, let's see. I'm going to give it just a second more to see if there's anything else that I wanted to get into. Who else has been saying stupid things? Well, Luke Ford, as usual. What was Luke Ford? Luke Ford was talking about the abortion thing. He had Kyle Rowland on there recently, and Kyle Rowland was saying, "Oh yeah, Luke Ford has it all right." Luke Ford is he couldn't be more backwards. It's just like he's playing this game where you're supposed to be blamed for everything that's gone wrong if you don't like the way America's going. It's all your fault if you don't get with the program. Of course, America's just great, and you shouldn't be blaming. You shouldn't be critical of the elitists, and what they say. It's absurd. And here's Kyle Rowland saying how worthwhile Luke Ford is as a voice, as a commentator on the status quo. I don't think so. Praise of folly. He was talking to someone cuckoo recently. Oh yeah, he was talking to James Kunstler, and that was disappointing. Well, not disappointing. It's predictable. Here's another one. What do you expect from the kosher folks? What do you expect from a Christian like Praise of Folly? He's going to be susceptible to kosher infiltration. All you have to do is either convert or say you're okay with my nutty religion, and you're one of us, right? I'm looking through my list of podcasts to jog my very bad memory. Of anybody I want to say something about, because, well, hopefully this weekend we'll be talking again with Par and Mirth and Snorkel and perhaps one or two others. Okay. I think that'll about do it for this. House of Commons is AA is not pro-European people; he's pro-abstraction, something like that. Yeah. Anti-democrat. Well, yeah, whatever. It's we discussed that. Got a new comment. I'll put the link to the stream in just on the. I'll give it 3 minutes. If somebody wants to join, I'll give it 5 minutes or 3 minutes opportunity to join if somebody wants to. That's this link not working. I'm cutting it and I'm going to paste it. I'll wait 4 minutes. But I think this was a good show. Oh, there's one other thing that one other correction to be made with the it's a minor correction with the kosher guy, and it goes to my terrible memory, and it's a comment on him because he actually occupied this position. He was saying that uh, he did the work of, well, I guess it's called a dispatcher, and he couldn't remember the term either, of cabbies in New York City. I think that's the term, a dispatcher. Neither of us could remember it, but he of all persons, even more than me, should have remembered, given that that was his job. On the radio dispatcher, right? Um, and he was working on this Mizrahi guy was working all these hands-on jobs: plumber, caddy, dispatcher, um, which are not stereotypically kosher. Uh, not the parasitic thing that the Nazis would try to characterize all kosher folks as being involved with. And I've never been wedded to that or any other absolute biological metaphor. It's not all important whether they are or not. It's not even all important whether the kosher folks are guilty of certain things or not. The important thing is that they are another people and well, they're another people, and they have to look after theirs while we have to look after ours. It's not an not an unreasonable working hypothesis to say that they have a different set of interests, which conflict with ours usually, often. But whether they are not, even if they don't, even if they share our interests, they're still not in our group. They're not. We would not include them in our union. They are another people. They are responsible to look after themselves. They're not our problem. Okay, then. So if anybody wants to join, you have one. Vaihu says he's too black pill. Well, there's no. I mean, I don't know who you are. I don't know whether you're Asian or Jewish or European, but I'm not black pilled. Lisbon is turning black. Ooh, that's bad. This is the thing, and I should have commented on this before. You jogged my memory of something very important. Why I find those people who are pro or anti-abortion to be absolutely against European interests, because you see the populations of Africa, the population rate, the growth rate, and you say that you're against abortion, and that it's like we'd be overwhelmed. I mean, that's not going to help. Let's put it that way. Portuguese, well, that's fine. Um, Portuguese are an underrated European people. Um, they have. I think they're by purists they could be criticized. They're criticized some because they might have a tad of Middle Eastern in them, or maybe even a tad of African at times. But these are small percentages, and mostly they're really good European people who, when you bring them into a city like Newark, New Jersey, where the Portuguese occupied Ironbound, famously in a good way. They said, the Italians and the Irish, other minorities would look upon them and say, not a coincidence that the Portuguese part of town was well maintained. These are people who are looked upon favorably. And it's not like the hoodies moving in and destroying the place. Well, come on, have you been listening to me? Pro-abortion is a proxy for the left. I mean, I've been talking for how long now about sorting out the terms of the left. I am absolutely pro-choice, and if you want to know why, you listen to the earlier part of the show again, because I discuss it there. There's no point in repeating it. And my position on, there's three distinctions to be made of the left. When you're talking about the left, you're talking about a characterology that's been promoted by the enemies of European peoples to distract them from an ethno-national left, which would be about unionizing our people and building coalitions of the unions for social advocacy, social organization, social advocacy. A crucial idea, which for homeostasis, for accountability and homeostasis, which our enemies don't want us to have. And that's why they have us arguing against the left. But when people, talking about the left, they have people thinking that can only mean the Marxist left, which is an internationalist left, wherein the proposed union is of the workers of the world uniting against the nation state, which is supposed to wither away, on behalf of, the workers of the world. And the other left that they want to see is the only kind of left. Only other kind of left is the cultural Marxist left, which is a unionization of non-whites and anti-whites. But they're not talking about a white ethno-national left, which would be a unionization of our folks. So and those lefts are liberalizations of our borders and bounds, which seek to liberalize our borders and bounds. So they are, in a sense, liberal with regard to us, with regard to our unionization. They're trying to scab our borders, open our borders. And they take with that these concepts of left, not just social organization, but the ideas of compassion and that would go along with accountability, all the things that would allow people the humaneness. It's not just about cold, brutal facts that they want us to identify with. Why they want us to be right wingers. No account. Brute facts. They're associating the left and its compassion and accountability with something that can only be against, that whites can't do, or it's not part of our identity. I mean, that's how flagrant this all is. Obvious it should be. And not only compassion, but reasonableness to handle the gray areas of praxis, of negotiation, so that we would be pro-choice. In the most extreme example, of course, your daughter is raped by a black, you're gonna abort that thing, of course. But you're not going to insist upon, people carrying to term children fathered by, Magic Johnson after he, was accommodating as many women as possible. This is not. It's simply not your problem, and to promote that life of the unborn child. If you're reasonable and honest, you really, at best, don't care and actually would prefer not to be burdened by this. Or let's say you're a white couple and you're able to tell that this child is going to be severely deformed. Do you want to carry that to term and devote your resources and life taking care of this drooling vegetative person strapped to a wheelchair for 30 years? Not if you're reasonable. So they're associating the left with reasonable positions and compassionate positions, truly compassionate positions, and they're trying to remove white identity from that. Again, and associate with the inherent instability of the right and its depth grammar of quests for objective truth warrants, which are short on accountability and correctivity, and therefore short on unstable because they're not facilitating homeostasis of our group interests. I do not have a low view of life at all. My position is that you can't value life so much as to make it unlivable. I have a high view of life. If you think that abortion is unconscionable, don't have one. I'm forcing people to have abortions. That's an pro-choice. I can understand that. I really can understand people who find abortion repugnant and unconscionable. Don't have one. Okay, so the link has been there, and if we were homogeneous, you would be anti-abortion. No, I'd still be pro-choice, but as again, I've always said, what I would do is I would set up counseling and centers for facilitating bringing children to term for mothers who might need counseling, that it can be a viable option and might need help to do that. So that they could put it up for adoption in those cases where they didn't want to raise the child themselves. But I would not make abortion illegal. I find it unconscionable that anyone would do that to a child, even if that child is not my own. Well, we disagree, Seamus Crawford. I thought you were a man. Yeah, I mean, I'll go to the most extreme example. If my daughter were raped by a black, say, and you were to tell me that she and I couldn't get that fetus aborted, you would have a big fight on your hands with me. Let me tell you. It means to say that, there are examples, there are cases where there's not much of a gray area for me in my maintenance of pro-choice. But for the most part, well, in my state, you would be allowed to argue. You could be you'd maybe be part of a committee that would try to try to propose counseling centers. The problem is, I wouldn't want you to be able to force the decision. The civilization, as Plato says, is a matter of persuasion, being victorious over force. And there are cases where maybe a girl should be persuaded to bring the child to term and put it up for adoption. Yes. Really, though, this is all after the fact. Of course, there shouldn't be these unwanted pregnancies to begin with. People should definitely be less promiscuous. They should be more careful and more careful about who and when they're having sex with. It's an extremely important decision. It should be who you're doing this with. And you should be responsible and careful enough not to and be competent enough not to have an unwanted pregnancy to begin with. And that's where most of the focus would be. So you could say safe, legal, and rare indeed. It's not an issue that I'm interested in discussing much. It's not a big thing for me, the abortion angle. But it's become relevant with this weird decision. Well, you can sue. How does it work? You can sue doctors or sue people who facilitate abortions for $10,000. It's pretty bad. And again, if you're concerned with white interests, with white people, with our relative interests, that puts you on the enemy side. It really does. So white people are generally more responsible. We are not as reckless as other people and as unthinking and as not as guilty of a lack of forethought. Ed Dutton's pro-choice also, but Ed Dutton is he has this sickening right-wing kind of Darwinistic, idea about it all. But what I was saying anyway, coming back to the more intelligent position than Ed Dutton would have, we would, our people are generally more thoughtful, more sublimated, thinking about what they're doing. There's not going to be as many unwanted pregnancies as the R selectors, the sub-Saharan Africans and so on. It's not as big a problem for us. So really, you're going to be the anti-abortion people are working against our interests. And also in terms of, there's going to be more thought in terms of by the people who are having an abortion. They're going to be more tortured by the decision and more conscientious, our European peoples. for the most part, yes. So I'm pretty satisfied that, on the whole, pro-choice is the position that advocates of European interests are going to take. Is pro-choice? I don't. It doesn't matter whether. I don't like talking in terms of eugenics. If we take care of our borders and boundaries, we can reconstruct the best qualities of our people well enough and minimize, reduce, and sort of gradually breed out the defective aspects in a way that's humanly, ecologically responsible. Okay, so now I'm going to give it 3 more minutes. If anyone wants to join, that'd be a good time to shut down, because it will have been 2 hours, and we'll still have somewhere around 9 hours of StreamYard, so that we'll have plenty of time to talk to next weekend to Per and Mirth Baron and Snorkel Blog and whomever else might like to join in. That is on board with us. Seamus Corp. The only exception that I make for abortion would be procedures that save the woman's life. Well, look, then you're hardcore pro-life. Are you a woman? Seems to me that you are, Seamus Crawford. You wouldn't even allow for abortion in the case of rape. I find that unconscionable. I find you immoral in that regard. Deeply, egregiously immoral. Don't you dare tell me that I couldn't get the fetus of a rape aborted. Okay. 1 minute. Last chance for anybody who wants to join. Here's the link. Again. And when you see the population of Africa and how it's expanding, and John Vance, definition of rape has changed. Well, we know where you're coming from on the issue of rape, so no point. Okay, 9 seconds. Thanks everybody again for joining us, and we'll talk to you this coming weekend, hopefully, with Per, Mirth Baron, our friend Mirth Baron, Per, and Snorkel Blog. Bye for now.